welcome down the warp pipe. In case you're new, I'm Ty. If not, great to see you again. On Saturday, my most recent short, my childlike love of gaming manifested itself and let me know it just beat Majora's Mask. So I handed it over a copy of Breath of the Wild on the Nintendo Switch, which it absolutely loved. However, it was shocked to learn that God of War Ragnarok is my most anticipated game of 2022. It then put me on the spot by asking if the Super Nintendo was still my favorite game console of all time. Yes, it absolutely is. I mean, there's so many reasons, but today I'm going to give you 6 of them, which are one for every generation the Super Nintendo has been a part of. Just want to let you know that these aren't in any particular order, and the first one up here is going to be that the Super Nintendo used cartridges in an era where they didn't limit developers in terms of design. This meant that there was no other consoles at the time which were using CDs, at least until the Sega CD. And even then, they weren't as mainstream or accessible as the Super Nintendo or the Sega Genesis with their cartridges. This leads into our next point, which is that the console generation that the Super Nintendo was a part of was the best console war. Whether you were a Sega kid or a Nintendo nut, it didn't matter. And if you happen to be one of those kids that had a TurboGrafx 16, well, you were just neutral like Switzerland was. And there's nothing wrong with neutral. These days, it's almost as if the console war doesn't exist anymore. Nintendo's got its own flavor because it's doing the Nintendo thing, and if you love high-octane narrative games, then you go with PlayStation. And if you want some awesome co-op games and some frantic racing, then Xbox has got you covered. So the console war pretty much died out, but the good old days are never gonna be forgotten. And speaking of stuff that's never forgotten, that brings us to point number 3, which is that pixel art design from that era was on point. Now, this is applicable to both the Genesis and the Super Nintendo. The art design and everything that could be accomplished with both the limited resolution but extended palette of colors available allowed developers to create some varied but still stylized graphics. This meant that they weren't relying on ever-increasing performance to push photorealism and had to actually use those art degrees for something other than making my face look a little bit prettier. And speaking of things that were pretty, the Super Nintendo was also the last generation that Nintendo had amazing third-party support. Nintendo having the horsepower to compete head-to-head with every other competitor meant that you weren't losing out on getting games due to the lack of horsepower or getting reduced or last generation ports. And you also had a variety of games due to this, whether they were arcade fun that was ported to home like Turtles in Time, or whether it was brand new adventures from Nintendo themselves in the form of Super Metroid or A Link to the Past. And with the Super Nintendo, you had brand new games that were either exclusive to the platform or, due to the hardware of that era, had exclusive versions. So whether you had a Super Nintendo or a Sega Genesis, if you happen to have both, you were the luckiest kid on the block. And all of this awesome third-party support leads us on to point number 5, which is that Nintendo was top dog during this era. Sure, the Sega Genesis ate Super Nintendo's lunch, but the Super Nintendo took it to dinner and made it pay. This meant amazing games pumped out with no gimmicks. Nintendo still makes great games today, but they actually have a little bit of gimmicks thrown in them. Whether it's Ring Fit or the Wii Balance Board, I'm not saying these are bad, it's just not the traditional classic Nintendo that we knew and loved, and it takes away a little bit from the resources that could be being put into adventures. This was also the era of Rare being a major player in Nintendo, whether it was Donkey Kong Country or Killer Instinct, and as far as I'm concerned, they were on the top of their game. So on to our 6th and last point here, which is that this controller is absolutely perfect for 2D games. Whether it's the fact that the D-pad is great, or the fact that the 4 face buttons, and if you were cool like me, you held it in a claw grip fashion, which gave your middle finger a little something to do. It doesn't matter what you're playing. If it's 2D, this is going to be the best way to play it. Those are 6 reasons why the Super Nintendo is still slamming and my favorite console of all time. Let me know down below what's your favorite console, and give me some of the reasons why. If it's Super Nintendo, let me know what I missed out on, because there's a ton of reasons why it's great, and I'll see you on Saturday for a short, and next Tuesday on Games Tuesday.